February 28, 1986. It's midnight in Stockholm, Sweden. Ice falls from the dark unknown and covers the ground below. Shops are closing, but light from their windows gives the icy pavement a blooming glow. Every now and then, a small group of people passes another. One of these groups included a middle-aged couple, their son, and his girlfriend, returning from the cinema and headed for the metro station, when sole footsteps behind them started closing the distance, and then the middle-aged man falls to the ground. The second bullet grazes his wife. She makes a half-turn and catches a glimpse of the assailant as he vanishes into the night. The haze of moonlight above and the glimmering ice below does little to reveal his identity. It doesn't take long for people to gather around. As the snow turns red, they shockingly stare at the man's face. It's their country's prime minister, Olof Palme. Olof Palme had a long and storied political career in Sweden. Leading the Swedish Social Democratic Party since 1969, he had championed a strong welfare state with labor rights. His high taxes and expensive welfare programs had a polarizing effect. The conservative factions of the country were not fans of the government's extensive intervention in the economy or of Olof's left-wing policies. But that was not his only controversial stance. He'd taken a stern moral position in foreign relations, harshly criticizing the South African apartheid regime, US involvement in Vietnam, and the Israeli occupation of Palestine. For all of his advocacy of neutrality and nuclear disarmament, he had formed a ton of domestic and international enemies. A lot of people wanted him gone. So who pulled the trigger? The gunshot was a bolt from the blue. It left the country in tatters, and its shockwaves were felt around the world. Olof was pronounced dead upon the body's arrival at the hospital. The Swedish police launched a massive investigation. Sifting through the plethora of potential leads required all hands on deck, but that only made the police jobs all the more difficult. No murder weapon, no clear motive, varying witness accounts, and dozens of potential suspects to wade through. Not to mention, they had been slow to react to the crime. They'd not only failed to cordon off crucial routes to stop the murderer from escaping, but they'd also failed to keep people from contaminating the crime scene. The police consulted Lisbeth Palme, the victim's wife, and she even made out the attacker in a police lineup. 3 years after the crime, Christer Peterson walked into the courtroom. He was a known alcoholic and had been convicted of manslaughter prior to this. The prosecution's only clear piece of material evidence included the 2 bullets, identified as .357 Magnum caliber, fired from a long-barreled handgun, and even those could not be linked to him. The defendant was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But it could not have been that simple, right? Well, of course not. Peterson was let off scot-free 3 months later, after an appeal court overturned the conviction. The wife persisted, claiming that Peterson was the man she saw that fateful night in February. But her word could not be trusted. Traumatized and in shock at the scene of the crime, and then bombarded with hundreds of names, faces, and ideas, it was her word against his. And just like that, a slew of theories came rushing to the forefront again. The media frenzy was back. As the 300-odd detectives had racked their brains behind closed doors, the cameras had rushed to get the first scoop outside. Beyond those cameras, there were a lot of conspiracy theories in the wild. A fairly potent one in the early days blamed the murder on the South African apartheid regime over a recent speech. Some people blamed Victor Gunnarsson, a right-wing critic of the former prime minister, who was allegedly close to the LaRouche movement. A suspect in the early proceedings, he was arrested but never faced trial. In 1993, his body turned up in North Carolina, USA, stripped naked, with 2 .22 caliber bullets in the back of his head, spurring even more theories about his connections to the case. Speaking of individuals, the police were initially very keen on a mysterious suspect, known only as GH. Not only had he failed to provide a reliable account of his whereabouts the night of the crime, but he'd also refused to turn in his .357 Magnum, which he later claimed that he'd sold to an unknown buyer. When he committed suicide in 2008, that lead went cold too, like most others. But new ones keep springing up. Some argued that the CIA was involved in the assassination, using a Chilean fascist or an Italian Masonic lodge called Propaganda Do to do its bidding. Some journalists have linked Palme's murder with the Bofors scandal regarding Sweden's arms trade with India. Other reports show that the police also investigated Kurds living in Sweden, blaming the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. Turkish newspapers have since claimed that the party admits the murder, but that does not count for much when there have been 134 murder confessions. Some German reports point to an operative of the Yugoslavian Security Service, but after 34 years, 10,000 interviews, 738 tested weapons, and close to 50 million USD in expenditure, the latest Swedish investigation believes it has uncovered the killer. They believe that Olof Palme was shot by Stig Engström, a graphic designer at the Skandia insurance company nearby, who was averse to the minister's policies. He claimed to be the first eyewitness to arrive on the scene and was mostly treated as a witness by the police. He developed a celebrity-like persona after the murder, criticizing the police and telling off other eyewitnesses in the media. The investigators point to his obsession with magnums, thinking that he obtained the gun from a friend, a gun collector. The Skandia Man theory that the investigators followed through on maintains that he chanced upon the Palme family and pulled the trigger. Connections to the mysterious GH have also been suggested. Since Engström took his own life in the year 2000, he can no longer be prosecuted. Closure remains elusive, since not everyone is convinced. Most Swedes believe that the new investigation did not bring any new evidence to the table, and their case is purely circumstantial. While the investigation is now officially closed, the assassination of Olof Palme remains an open wound. Who do you think killed Olof Palme? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.